Have you ever been there, poured months, maybe even years of just everything you've got into building something new, a team, a project, a community?
All that effort.
Right. And then this question hits you. Can this actually survive? Can it thrive without me right in the middle of it all?
Yeah, that's the classic Cantor's dilemma, isn't it? That core anxiety.
It really is, because if you don't get that transition right, well, things don't just slow down.
No, they can grind to a halt.
Exactly. Momentum stalls. The local leaders you've been trying to raise up, they get frustrated, sidelined.
And the whole vision,
Yeah.
it just risks fizzling out.
Yeah. But what's fascinating and what the source material really hammers home is maybe we're looking at this wrong.
How so?
Well, you mentioned anxiety, but what if this transition isn't something to dread?
Okay, I see where you're going.
Mhm.
The research consistently frames it differently. It suggests we should see this handover not as a point of failure or fear, but actually as potentially the most powerful catalyst for real growth.
A catalyst for growth. I like that. So clinging on actually limits things.
Precisely. It limits the potential impact. But a really strategic handover, done well, it instantly multiplies that sense of ownership.
Spreads the load, too, I imagine.
Quickly distributes the burden, yeah.
Mhm.
And it ensures the vision becomes, something much bigger than any one person could ever manage alone. It's really the key step for any kind of long-term scaling.
Okay, so that shift in perspective from necessary dependency early on to this idea of a powerful catalyst later, that's really key.
It is.
So our mission in this deep dive is basically to unpack that. We want to look at the sort of theological reasons why delegation is seen as this divine strategy.
Right, the why behind it.
Then identify those objective signs, the markers of readiness, like a checklist almost.
Kind of a checklist, yeah. When is the time right?
Exactly. And finally, lay out the practical steps, the blueprint for actually doing a healthy, sustainable handover that empowers everyone involved.
Sounds good. Where should we start? With the theology.
Yeah, let's start there, the theological foundations. Because the material uses this really powerful, consistent imagery from farming.
The agricultural metaphors.
Yeah, you see it everywhere. The young plant, that tender shoot from Isaiah, right? Vulnerable, but full of potential.
Mm-hmm. And the vine in John 15.
Exactly, the fruitful vine. And the point seems to be that, yeah, initial dependency on the founder, the planter, is totally necessary, like watering a tiny seedling.
You have to nurture it at the start.
But that's never the end goal, is it? The real aim is multiplication, maturity, fruitfulness, all under local leadership, local stewardship.
And that connects directly to this theological rhythm the source and talk about. Stewardship and release.
Stewardship and release. Tell me more.
Well, the planter's job mirrors God's work in a way, providing nourishment, guidance, maybe even some tough pruning sometimes.
Okay.
But the tricky part, the real challenge, is knowing when your role changes. When do you shift from that direct nurturing to, strategic release?
Releasing control.
Yeah. Think about it. If a gardener keeps a shade cloth over a plant that needs full sun to actually produce fruit, what are they doing?
They're stopping it from doing what it's designed to do.
Exactly. They frustrate its very design. And the sources argue that holding on to control after the point of readiness, it stunts the growth of the very thing you're trying to protect. It's counterproductive.
Wow. Okay, that's a strong way to put it. Is the implication there that holding on too long isn't just bad strategy? It's something more, maybe spiritually problematic.
It really connects to how we understand authority and God's design for growth. Look at the precedents in Scripture. Delegation isn't just some modern corporate buzzword.
Right.
It's presented as a divine strategy for sustainability.
Yeah.
Think about Jethro and Moses back in Exodus 18.
Ah, yeah, good example.
Moses is sitting there trying to judge everyone himself. Millions of people. He's burning out. The whole system is bottlenecked.
Total gridlock.
Right. And Jethro's advice isn't just, hey, Moses, get some help. It's structural.
Yeah.
He says, appoint able men who fear God. Delegate real authority to them for the day-to-day stuff.
So it's about building a sustainable structure, not just offloading tasks.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It stops the leader from being that single point of failure, the one person everything depends on. You can't scale that.
Okay. And the New Testament picks up on the structural idea.
Absolutely. Ephesians 4 lays it out pretty clearly. Leaders, apostles, prophets, planters, teachers, they are given why? To equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ.
To equip others to do the work.
Yes. The planter models it, gives the initial vision, maybe casts it, but the moment the local body is equipped and ready, If the planter keeps doing the work for them, they're actually undermining the whole reason leaders exist in the first place, according to that
You're
passage.
stifling the very growth you were meant to foster.
You got it. Stifling the growth.
Okay, the why is becoming incredibly clear now, deeply rooted reasons.
Yeah.
But practically speaking, this is where it gets tough, right? Knowing when.
The timing.
So let's shift to that transition checklist you mentioned. The markers of readiness, which, as you said, need to be like a spiritual compass, not just picking a date on a calendar.
Right. It's about observing the reality on the ground.
So what's the absolute foundation? Marker number one.
Marker one has to be doctrinal rootedness.
Yeah.
And this isn't about, everyone having a theology degree.
Okay.
What is it then?
It's about spiritual maturity in practice. Can the local body, the community itself, understand, articulate, and actually apply core biblical truths without constantly running back to the planter for every little thing?
So less reliance on the founder for interpretation.
Exactly. The real test is, can the community self-diagnose? Can it self-correct when things go off track, doctrinally?
Okay, walk me through that. What does it look like when they can't self-correct? What's the failure mode? Well, the failure mode is often that the group becomes overly dependent on the planter's specific interpretation or, frankly, their personality. It can drift towards like a personality cult dynamic.
Right, centered on one person?
Yes, but when they are rooted, they can explain the core gospel message themselves. And crucially, they have the internal confidence and authority to address errors within the group, like Paul told Timothy to do, right? To entrust truth to faithful people who can teach others.
So the planter is no longer the indispensable interpreter.
Correct. The local leaders step into that role. That's real foundational maturity.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, marker two. I suspect this is the one that causes founders the most heartburn,
It can be tough.
because it feels like letting go of the reins entirely. Marker two is spiritual ownership and initiative.
Yes, that visible shift.
Describe that shift. What does it look like?
It's when the community stops, sort of, waiting for the planter to tell them what to do next. They stop being purely reactive.
And start initiating things themselves.
Exactly. They take initiative.
Yeah.
And you hear it in the language, too. It stops being the planter's vision or David's project, and it becomes our vision, our church, our community.
That requires, like you said, a real emotional step back for the founder.
Whoa, absolutely. A deep sacrifice, sometimes. But it's completely essential if the thing is going to be resilient long term. There's a great example in the source material from Malawi, the Village of Hope.
Okay, tell us about that.
So David, the planter, he'd been there for years. Then a nearby village gets hit by some really bad flooding. What happens next is key. Two emerging local leaders, Joseph and Samuel, they don't wait. They don't call David, who was actually away at the time. They just acted.
What did they do?
They immediately organized supplies, got volunteers together from their own community, went over to help, and even shared their faith while they were there. Completely autonomous action.
Wow. And how did David, the planter, react when he found out?
Well, he later said he was like momentarily shocked. Not because they did it, but because he was totally out of the loop.
He found out after the fact.
Yes. The whole thing was already underway and successful before he even knew. And that kind of immediate faithful initiative, that's the proof of real ownership. It shows the community is mission-driven and resilient, even if the founder isn't physically present.
That's a fantastic illustration of resilience. Okay, so we have doctrinal rootedness, we have spiritual ownership. What's the final marker?
Marker 3 is about functional capacity and sustainability. This is getting down to the nuts and bolts.
So practical systems.
Right. Can the organization actually function independently on a practical level? The sources highlight two main things here. First is having resilient ministry teams.
Okay. What does resilient mean in this context?
It means the core ministries are primarily led by lay leaders, by local volunteers, not solely by the planter or paid staff brought in by the planter. Think about essential things like children's programs, maybe worship teams, outreach activity.
Things that have to happen every week, consistently.
Exactly. These systems just cannot grind to a halt if the planter gets sick, goes on vacation, or eventually moves on. If those core functions completely depend on the founder being there, then the community isn't functionally ready for independence.
Lay leadership provides that continuity.
It ensures continuity and resilience, yes.
And the second part of functional capacity.
Financial self-sufficiency. And this isn't just about having a balanced budget, though that's part of it. It's deeper.
How so?
It's really a marker of commitment and ownership. If the community is still heavily reliant on the planter's personal money or, funds they raise from their external network,
Creates a weird dynamic.
a profoundly unhealthy power dynamic, yeah.
Mhm.
The local body, the church, has to demonstrate a real commitment to local giving. They need to develop and operate under a sustainable financial plan that's based on their own resources.
It's proof they're taking responsibility.
It's proof of maturity, absolutely. It shows integrity and stewardship and a genuine sense of local responsibility for their own mission. If they aren't willing to pay the bills for their own existence, well,
They aren't really ready to be autonomous.
pretty much, yeah. Not functionally.
Okay, so assuming these markers are starting to show, now we get to the really challenging part. Maybe the most challenging, personally and spiritually.
The actual handover.
The sacred art of the handover, as the Imperial calls it. The moment the planter actually needs to step back. How does that work best?
Well, the first thing the sources stress is it has to be methodical. It needs to be staged, not abrupt.
Not just dropping the keys and leaving.
Definitely not. An abrupt exit can create a vacuum, panic, confusion. A staged, phased withdrawal is much healthier. It lets the new local leaders sort of grow into their roles, gain confidence step by step, while still knowing there's a bit of a safety net.
So the planter's role shifts from doer
To advisor and mentor. They move gradually from being the primary person making things happen, the executor, to someone who coaches, supports, and advises from the sidelines.
Okay, that sounds good in theory. But how do you stop that advisor role from creeping back into micromanagement?
Yeah. That's the danger zone.
Because that would just kill the initiative you worked so hard to build with marker 2, right?
Exactly. It completely undermines ownership. The planter has to practice what you might call radical restraint.
Radical restraint.
The advisory role means you offer counsel when asked. You celebrate their wins. You, crucially, let them learn from their own mistakes without jumping back in to fix everything.
Let them fail sometimes.
Let them learn through failure, yes. It's out for the most powerful teacher, isn't it? Resist that urge to rescue the situation when things don't go perfectly according to your old plan.
That takes serious discipline from the founder.
Huge discipline. And humility.
And another key point the material makes is that this handover, this transition of authority, it can't just be like a quiet memo or a private chat.
No, absolutely not. It needs to be public.
Why the emphasis on public?
Public affirmation is vital for clarity and confidence throughout the whole community. The sources point back to biblical examples again, like Moses laying hands on Joshua before all Israel.
Everyone saw it happen.
Everyone saw it. The transfer of authority needs to be visible, clear, unambiguous. It prevents confusion, prevents potential division down the line about who's actually in charge now.
Okay, so if you're planning this, what does that public handover moment, maybe a final commissioning service, actually need to include to make it legitimate and build that confidence?
The research points to a few key elements. First, obviously the public affirmation of the new leaders. That might involve prayer, a formal blessing, maybe a symbolic gesture like handing over a Bible or, some symbolic mantle.
The symbolic part.
Right, but the absolutely critical functional step is the second element. The new leadership team needs to publicly lead something significant for the first time.
Like what?
Like leading the main service, administering communion, perhaps giving the main teaching, something that clearly demonstrates their new functional authority in front of everyone.
So it's not just symbolic, it shows they're actually taking the reins.
Exactly. It makes the whole thing legitimate. It ensures people see it as a real commissioning, not just the founder stepping down or abandoning ship.
Let's think about the planter for a second. The founder's own well-being. Doing this handover well avoids that situation we talked about, the leader becoming the bottleneck, right?
Absolutely.
So if they successfully release the day-to-day execution, what does their role ideally become? Where should their energy go?
Their time and energy get freed up, ideally, to focus on things that have a much higher leverage, a bigger impact.
Like what kind of things?
We're talking about really intensive coaching and mentoring of those new leaders, spending significant time in prayer for the community, helping maintain alignment with the big picture vision, and maybe even exploring opportunities to plant something new elsewhere.
So they multiply their influence instead of just managing one thing.
Exponentially, yes. By letting go of the direct control, they actually increase their kingdom impact and, importantly, avoid that burnout trap that catches so many founders who try to hold on too long.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We started with this picture of the fragile seedling, totally dependent on the planter. We've walked through the hard work of getting those roots down deep doctrinally in terms of ownership, functionally.
Yeah, building that foundation.
And now we've landed on this idea of a careful public handover.
And completing that handover properly. It's presented as ultimately an act of spiritual fidelity, isn't it? And real maturity, both for the planter and the community.
Fidelity to the mission.
Right. That shift from founder-led to locally led, it reflects God's design for multiplication for growth. You're moving the community from being that fragile seedling needing constant protection
To becoming what?
to becoming a resilient, fruit-bearing tree, as the sources put it. Something capable of standing on its own, growing, and even reproducing itself through different seasons.
And the relevance for you listening, it's pretty clear this isn't just theory for church planters, is it?
Oh, not at all.
This is really a masterclass in sustainable leadership, delegation, empowerment. It applies to, well, any startup, any nonprofit, any team leader trying to build something that lasts beyond them.
Absolutely. The core principles are universal.
Yeah.
True, lasting influence is almost always maximized when you release it, empower others,
Right.
rather than clinging on to control.
Released, not clung to. That's a great takeaway.
So maybe here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on, drawn from the material. If a planter's or any founder's ultimate legacy isn't measured just by what they accomplished personally in those early days,
Okay.
but rather by what God or the mission or whatever driving force you have accomplishes through the leaders they successfully empowered long after they're gone, then what does your personal definition of success need to look like, say, 1 year after you've completely stepped back from the operational center? How do you need to redefine success for yourself?